Today's story: my 19F biological father's M45 wife 40F said she wants me to leave them alone. Okay. This is gonna be kinda long because the amount of drama leading up to this is ridiculous. Usually I just summarize, but the context is important. I'm gonna change names and specific locations cause I don't wanna get tracked down and found out and stuff. Backstory. It all started a few months before I was even conceived. My biological mother, let's call her Chloe, was engaged to a man who we will call Carl. So Chloe was working at a Walmart while engaged to Carl, and decided to cheat on him with her boss, who we'll call Harold. So Harold had no idea Chloe was engaged until they had been dating for a while. Things are going well between them until one day Harold catches Chloe on a date with his best friend. This leads to a big fight where Chloe hits Harold and he has to lock her out of the house to protect himself. She calls the police on him, and due to the crappy domestic dispute laws in their state, they both spend the night in jail. Somehow Harold is blamed for the incident and is ordered to take 2 years of anger management, and decides to never speak to Chloe again. A few weeks later Harold gets a text from one of his friends, telling him that Chloe is pregnant and that Harold is the father. He immediately calls bullshit, because Chloe is not only engaged to another man who is probably the father, but was also being intimate with many other men. So he brushes it off and forgets about it. A couple months pass, and Harold gets a call from an adoption agency saying that they need to talk to him. Chloe has decided to give the baby, hey, that's me, up for adoption, and Harold needs to sign some papers since she put him down as the father. He agrees to sit down with someone from the agency, but only to talk to them about the claims. So he meets a representative and tells them that he doesn't think he's the father. The guy from the agency goes, "Oh, great. Just sign here then," and hands Harold the documents to surrender his rights as a father. Harold signs them and doesn't hear anything from them again. Meanwhile with Chloe, she has the baby, with her fiancé in the room, which gives me infinite respect for him, and the baby is adopted 3 days later. Unfortunately, the baby, who is me, was born with a slew of genetic illnesses, and I end up in the hospital only 20 days later because my kidney was collapsing in on itself. To save time, let's just say that growing up I spent a disgusting amount of time in the hospital. My health was in a perpetual downward spiral, and every time we found a solution to one problem, a new one would pop up and wreak havoc on my tiny body. It all came to a head one day when I was 13, when I was in so much pain that my doctors thought I was having a heart attack. I wasn't, but hadn't been diagnosed yet, so they had no clue. So after being told by my doctors in the hospital that I had a heart attack, my adopted dad, who we'll call Marcus, freaked out and finally reached out to Harold for the first time. He asked for his medical records so that they could better assess the situation and decide what to do. Here is where the problem started. The first incident. So while I was busy being cripplingly ill, Harold had forgotten all about me and started a new life with a woman he met a month after my birth. Let's call her Heather because she reminds me of Heather Duke. They had 2 sons at the time, and Harold hadn't told Heather anything about maybe having another kid. To clarify, I wasn't there for this part, so I am only telling what I have been told happened. So Heather finds the email that my dad sent to Harold and absolutely loses her mind. She thinks he cheated on her or something, and blocks my dad on Facebook and starts messaging Chloe on Facebook. Now this is where the story gets a little tricky. I have been told 2 different versions of this event and honestly I'm not 100% sure which one is true, so I'll just tell both. Chloe's version: Heather started sending mass amount of hate and harassment to Chloe, basically telling her to step off and get away from her man. Heather insisted that Harold wasn't the father, and Chloe was lying. By this point in time Chloe was already married, and had 2 daughters that she kept, one who belonged to her old fiancé, and one who belonged to her current husband, and had also built a relationship with me. She read me some of the messages that Heather sent during a weekend I was spending with her and my half-sister almost 4 years later. She said, I quote, "Her grammar was atrocious, but I didn't think correcting it was the right way to go." Heather's version: Heather reached out to Chloe to talk to her about the situation and what she wanted them to do. Chloe snapped at her and said there was no way that my parents would put me through a paternity test. Because Chloe said that, they decided not to pursue the test. After these communications all contact was lost and my dad lost Harold's cell phone number. The whole interaction ended with no paternity test, and no medical records. Recent events. Okay, now that that's out of the way, here is what has happened in the last month. So my health has progressively gotten worse and I now have to apply for disability if I want to pay for my ungodly amount of medications. The lawyer I hired said that having a full family medical history might be helpful. So I asked my super smart friend to track Harold down so I could contact him. Long story short, I got his number and I left him a voicemail that was basically me just begging him to help me and that I was sorry for intruding on his life, and begging for him not yell at me. He called back after like 20 minutes, and to my extreme surprise he was happy to hear from me. He said that not contacting me was one of the biggest regrets of his life. We cried together on the phone, and I told him about the genetic disorders I have and how I was worried for his kids. He assured me that they were healthy, and I cried cause I was relieved. We talked throughout the week until eventually he had to fly home from his business trip, and tell his wife what was going on. Needless to say, it did not go well. Heather was pissed and demanded that we limit contact until the results of the paternity test came in. Unfortunately for her, it came back positive and confirmed that I am his daughter. Here is where the story gets sticky again, because I have been told two different versions of what happened during the last week. Harold's version: Harold and Heather got in a big fight and she made him tell her sons what he did. Maybe it was meant to humiliate him, but if so it backfired because his sons were so excited to have a sister. One of them compared me to Shazam, I think. Harold left to go on another trip for work, and he and Heather fought right before he left for the airport. He called me while he drove there and told me all of this, and said that he didn't want to lose contact with me again. I was so happy he still wanted me around, but I was sad that I screwed up his family. He told me it wasn't my fault, but I still felt bad. I got Heather's version of events much later, at 11 p.m. when I was trying to eat my ramen. She messaged me on Facebook and claimed that this is what really happened. Heather's version: Harold was unhappy about the test and said that I was too much too fast, but wouldn't tell me that because he didn't want to hurt my feelings. They told their sons and they weren't happy about it either. She told me that Harold hardly has time for his kids, and I was forcing your way in. Now I am a very sensitive person and have a habit of breaking down over the smallest things because of other stuff that's happened in my past, but that's not relevant right now, which is why I'm very proud of how I handled this. I texted Harold and told him that his wife had contacted me, and within seconds he had called me and asked me to read what she had said. I read it to him and also read the apology I sent to her. He apologized on her behalf and asked if I was okay because I sounded like I was crying, which I was, but I didn't want him to feel bad, so I just told him I was fine and I was just tired. I asked him what I should do and he told me to just be myself. So I apologized to her again and again while she snapped at me, and eventually she stopped and I got to go to bed. Things were quiet after that, and I tried not to message them because I didn't want to get yelled at again. This morning I got diagnosed with severe scoliosis and yesterday with epilepsy, and since those are usually genetic, I texted Harold and told him he might want to get his sons tested for it. Apparently this was a bad idea because Heather proceeds to message me and tell me to stop texting them and that I was not helping their marriage. I tried to explain that I was just trying to help, and asking her to please stop lashing out at me, but she just texted back with "I'm not lashing out. We just want you to leave us alone." I haven't responded back because her message really hurt and I just shut down and fell asleep to cope. I apologized to Harold, but he hasn't replied to the text, which is making me think that maybe they really do want me to leave them alone, but I also know that Harold told me the exact opposite. My anxiety is having a field day and I have absolutely no idea what to do. My main goal in this situation is to preserve my relationship with Harold, and try to get Heather to like me. What do I do? TLDR, biological dad's wife doesn't want me around at all and keeps telling me things that I know aren't true because biological dad already told me the truth. Now she is claiming that they want me to leave them alone, even though he told me he wanted to build a relationship. Help please. You don't need Heather to like you. Heather is not part of this. Block Heather. Do not speak to her. Your relationship is with Harold and Harold alone. It is entirely possible that Harold said things were going really fast. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means he may be overwhelmed, but there's nothing wrong with that. I think he's being very honest when he says that he wants a relationship with you. Heather sounds like a piece of work. Don't even waste your time with her. Get Harold's medical history and genetic profile. You need this. Then pursue your relationship with him separately from the medical stuff. Good advice below. First, concentrate on getting all the medical information you need to sort out any disability allowance you are entitled to. Then secondly, build your relationship with Harold, and only Harold. See him on a one-to-one basis in a neutral environment. Then thirdly, let Harold's kids take the lead as to whether they want to see you. Finally, do not let Heather into your life. No texts, no calls, no visits. Also avoid anyone else who causes you pain and anguish. Top priority, look after yourself.